include possibly in 6.1, which could be effective very soon, because those no, they're not light. They're not light ones, but for once we want to remove the backup retention on the Atomic Assets API backups. It is currently set to, I think, 13 or 14 days. I could look that up. Doesn't really matter, because if you start your Atomic Assets node from a snapshot which is 30 days old, it will still take you a few days to replay until the latest state, right? So we think such a long backup retention doesn't really make sense. We want to cut that. We didn't decide yet on what retention we would require, but probably a week or so. I don't know exactly what we agreed on. But overall, I believe we are planning to make the backup retention, the retention periods for backups provided shorter, because the issue is you will still need a few days to replay until you reach the latest state. Any feedback on that? Good change. Do we like that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this: having a backup a month and a half, 2 months old of AA, that's still 4 or 5 years worth of data and indexing you're skipping. So it's not worthless, but I mean, you are right that it's going to take you a couple of days to be able to catch back up with it, but
yeah.
So
makes sense.
what it's about is that previously we required guilds to keep more than one backup. So we're just saying one backup is enough. Just have one backup in a certain time frame, and that's enough. Don't keep an older one, because it's pointless.
I would tend to agree. It's kind of like state history is. Look, it's
originally,
not current.
Originally, the idea was that we had very limited access to backups. We only had like 2 to 3 providers. So we said, like, yeah, just in case one is broken, let's keep a retention of older backups. So, but I think we now reach a stage where we have enough backups, and we also want to propose more changes to how backups are valued. So, yeah.
Right. That one is the first, which will be easy to implement in case you are providing Atomic Assets API backups. We are going to name the backup retention, and then you can start deleting all the backups. And then another one which has a hidden requirement to it. We want the partial Hyperion nodes in the network to be registered on the Query Hub, so that the users can discover and find them, and also, very important, they can use the Query Hub SDK to auto-discover the best partial node next to them by latency, by uptime, all provided by the Query Hub. So in order to receive a score for a partial history node, you would need to register that endpoint with Query Hub. We already have a few registrations with the Query Hub, and WAC Sweden and Sentinels and WAC USA are already registered over there and helping with getting that tool polished. However, this requirement will...
Are you sure that should be a requirement already, though? The releases that you need to do that are not officially released yet. They are develop releases.
We know that. However, there is a branch 3.5.0/-5, right? And this is the latest one. So this version is being worked on. You guys have reported a few issues with it. I'm pretty sure it's still somewhat in progress or in development, but we need that version to require the registration for the Query Hub. So we need to move to 3.5.0.
That's why I'm questioning this. Isn't it better to wait until it's a full release? Until it's done?
So potentially it's better, yeah. Of course, it's better if Igor announces, "Hey, this is a 3.5 and we are releasing it." But
Well, that's
are we
a
going to wait
joke.
another half a year for
I was
that
gonna say
release
that's a
to
joke
be
within itself
released?
that I pick on Igor about his release schedule. But I'll say this, and just to put it into perspective, there's still a lot of work, especially on the way that whole infrastructure works. Currently, it's based off of the local Hyperion node and phoning statistics and all of that. And really, and he's working on it, Igor is, it needs to be more holistic at like the proxy server level or better handling big providers or providers that have multiples. So just even fundamentally, the entire mechanic of how that query phone home and API is, I don't know when, but it is fundamentally changing because it needs to. It works, it's great. It definitely is functioning. I can tell you this, there's still some bugs. And when you go to 3.5, you're going to have to fight some issues that you may not have had to fight before. I mean, so like there's some people that are going to say, I would rather not do 3.5 because it breaks something or changes something. Like you lose swagger. I still don't think I have swagger back, but fully support it down the road as it gets polished, maybe even as a bonus incentive or something, because it takes time to work through all of this and set it up and then rebuild it. But as for requiring it, you're not close to that. In my opinion, I think you
I
could
agree.
propose it and say maybe once a certain line crosses, but it definitely is still a heavy.
It will also
work.
require all partial Hyperions to upgrade their Elasticsearch version, or it won't work. And updating Elasticsearch might break everything.
Right. Yeah,
So
I
they
think
might
I
need to
got
set up a
by.
new one. Yeah, it's like it might work, and if it works, fine, no
Right.
problem. If it fails, then you have a lot of issues. There are things I think it's good to have this as a plan, a roadmap. I don't think it's ready.
Okay,
Right.
noted that feedback. That's definitely something we can work with. Let's call it your guys' recommendation to postpone that until we have a release of 3.5.
Postpone it being part of any of the the history provider review. By all means, I encourage everybody to participate and help and get involved. So if y'all want to help promote that, that by all means. But that I would not start putting it as a requirement.
Okay. Then in parallel, I'm marking that with another color so that we are tracking that change. That all of that will draw back a little bit our plan to move on with the partial and full Hyperion history changes that we want to apply sooner than later. But it is what it is.
Progress and planning forward. I love it.
Okay. That were what we believed light changes that we wanted to see reflected in 6.1. The history solution one is probably not going to make it in. For the 6.1, we are also going to properly review all the backup retention dates that we defined. You'll see an updated version of that. And then we can move on to a few more items that we have on the list for a later guideline update. So we are, and this one may be debatable. We want the core. So going forward, we want the core infrastructure, the BP, the APIs, the peering nodes, if possible, to be hosted on owned bare metal servers which we will be granting extra points for. How are we planning to evaluate if someone is hosting on his own hardware in his own data center or co-locating in the data center? This is going to be self-declared in the beginning, and then we are just giving you the trust of the doubt of the I don't know how to call it. You will just declare it. Exactly, the benefit of the doubt. You will declare it on your own, and we will probably have the chance to see through incidents and network or other outages on the Hetzner or OVH side. We will probably be able to see if the self-declaration is done correctly.
Not necessarily. They can have a proxy or load balancer on Hetzner or another place that will mark it down even though the backend servers are not.
Yeah, but that should not happen because it means getting these points means you're completely independent from Hetzner. So you should not have any important infrastructure on Hetzner that would go down if Hetzner goes down. That's the whole point of this criteria.
Someone's raising his hand. It's Joseph. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just stretching.
Yeah, I only want to point out that the exact things that we're going to do to validate this haven't yet been decided. So
Correct.
I think that we should do more like live interviews with the teams where they show us the servers and that kind of stuff. But the exact things that we're planning to do, we haven't got an agreement yet. We also discussed this morning to set like a time frame between your declaration that you are self-hosted and that you are and the time that you are actually starting to get the points. And that's specifically for the teams that we don't know for sure that they own their own infrastructure, because there are some teams that we already know that they have it, right? But we haven't the exact rules yet on the time frame. It's still on debate.
I obviously support it. It's going to be a very fun topic of conversation, I feel like it was last time. It's hard to run self-owned equipment first, and then even on top of that, self-hosting. I'd even support the argument that once you start trying to do self-hosted, you start becoming very precarious, like Null says.
We're also considering co-location, right? So you have your own hardware and you co-locate on a data center. We just need to be sure that not all the servers are in the same data center.
That's where it gets into this, well, is it just not these 4 or 5 that are heavily populated? We'll make them move out. You remember, anyway, I get it. But it's, I don't know, that curve of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm the poster child of, nah, bro, I do everything myself. I pay out the ass for it, and I suffer more than everybody else because I'm not a tier 4 data center.
Yeah. I think we all agree that it's not something that we can policy like 100% and be sure that it cannot be game and that kind of stuff. But I think we have to do our best and foster decentralization and reward teams that are investing in hardware and they are also self-hosting or co-locating, and they're actually trying to move away from the massive data centers. It won't be perfect, and it won't be easy, but I think we have to try, right?
And one thing to kind of keep in mind with that is that, say somebody does, the reason everybody's in OVH and Hetzer is because they're the cheapest, best provider of that. Cool. If you're going to force people not to take that option because everybody is, okay, everybody that's doing it's going to incur 10-20% hardware increase costs just because they've got to use same equipment somewhere else more expensive. So I mean, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's where the score for it comes in. So there would be a score for it. So this would, for standbys, directly translate to increase in pay, and this increase in pay would usually offset the cost feasibly. Because if you're getting 2 points more as a standby, 2 points more is almost 2K in extra pay per month. So, and we're not decided yet if we're doing 2 points or 3 points, but it's somewhere in the range of 2 to 3K US dollars more you're paid per month, and that's should be sufficient to buy hardware and co-locate or pay for server housing. So I know it's going to be more complicated for people inside top 21 because it would not translate to an increase in pay. But for the lower ones, it would.
Yeah,
fine with it.
But it was also like, recognition of what you already have. And if you, for some reason, you cannot invest now in products, or you cannot keep up with the products, but you are heavily invested in infrastructure, that's a way, right, to compensate the lack of development, because for whatever reason, now it's not the right time, the price is too low of the token, it's difficult to get into developing projects, and you already invested heavily in infrastructure, that somehow recognizes this, because yeah, we need products, but we also need a strong protocol, right? So we are all wondering what will happen if Hetzner has a major issue, and that could be really fun to see.
Oh, we had that once where 3 or 4 producers went down a couple years ago.
I kind of like it because you see the people that pay attention to their email saying, hey, OVH is going to go down in 3 days. And then when one of the BPs breaks in 3 days, I don't have a question what the problem is. I know exactly. So I kind of like being able to predict the future like that. I kid. Anyway, I don't envy you. And you all remember the fun we had with this requirement, 5 years ago? You want a picture of me holding a banana in front of my rack and the date of the current day,
But you have to try.
Verification on a dating website. Hold the banana in front of your servers.
That I guess was part of that reference. But anyway, but I do, like I say, I also warn, be careful, because self-owned, self-hosted, most people, probably including myself, don't do that very well.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion, if you do that, before you start to get the points, there should be a couple months, like 3 months or so, where you show you can provide a stable service, and only once you've proven that, you'll actually start to get the points.
Would you do that like on testnet?
Yeah, probably. I mean, yeah.
That's the only way to prove it, That's what I mean, Noel can spin up a standby.
Yeah, you can do it. That's actually an idea. So people, even top 21, could start say, we want to switch to self-hosted or self-owned, and then we vote them in and standby and testnet, and they start to produce in testnet. And after 3 months, they could right away switch on mainnet if they feel comfortable with it.
I guess I'll sprinkle in, this is kind of counter against the value providers and the infrastructure providers. You're going to make these value providers have to spend more just to be able to try to compete, which is pulling the funds away from what you really want them to build as value providers. But
no, they don't, because it's not a race.
Yeah,
I mean, they don't need to do it. If they have enough points, they don't need to do it. There's no point in doing it.
And they can still focus on products.
Yeah.
But that all what they all do is they do them in, but that's why you have the points for tech, is that, all right, we may not score you much on your product, but I know you're trying. But at least if you can do all these other infrastructure things, you'll get some pay. You'll have to spend some of it on the infrastructure.
Yep.
But now you got to spend more of it on the infrastructure.
Yeah, but check the penalties. If you fail, you know exactly what happens. If you fail on producing blocks, your infrastructure start to fail, you can lose everything for a couple of weeks. So, I mean, this is not,
which makes the situation worse, to be honest.
This is not intended for the small teams to go and farm points. This is intended for the stronger teams, that have experience, and they already have some infrastructure, self-hosted or co-located, to get rewarded for this and maybe increase their operations because they know what they are doing.
And even then, I want to add the comment that even though you might know what you do and then you decided to move bare metal or self-hosted with your servers, which makes it more expensive, you're getting some extra funds, but this still doesn't save you from losing rounds and losing your pay while still having the higher cost. So how are those points meant to be distributed, like permanently, no matter how reliable your block production is, or is it added on top of the reliability score? I think we didn't talk about that yet. Because if your score still depends on the reliability and you took the risk to host it on your own hardware, you're having higher cost and you're getting your pay cut.
Well, that's what I guess kind of what I was going to say is I can't speak for all of them, but I don't know how many of your top 21 VPs would make the effort to decentralize because they've got their flagship products. That's what they focus on. They don't need the extra points for the extra overhead and cost and maintenance for no reward. What's the net gain of trying to get more to decentralize? Your top 21 would still, I mean, do you think that the top 5 producers need any extra points for paying 20% more for their hardware?
I think it's the other way around, Michael. I think it's to reward those that do it and see it as a product for them.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, I do get that. But the end game is to try to decentralize at least the active top 21. I don't think you're going to do that. I think the people that are going to strive for those points are going to be maybe your.
It's a small step.
Yeah, exactly. This is not the solution for the whole problem, but I think it's a first step in the right direction.
For the sake of the argument, obviously, in my position, I support it. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and just that holistic view of, I would assume that there's going to be providers that we really would like for them to say, sure, I'll move out of Hexer. And them to be like, nope, not worth it. And we're right back to where we are, except now we're trying to take pictures of bananas in front of server racks. I don't envy you guys.
Any other comment on that list item? Core infrastructure. Extra points for owned and bare metal hardware.
And as Kafer said, this is only if you have 100% of your stuff self-hosted.
No, well,
definition is not clear here.
Yeah, but I think the minimum is the producer and the peer-to-peer nodes should be the primary nodes should be self-hosted or co-located in not in the massive data centers that everyone is. We are not against using Hetzner for backups or whatever or you need, but we at least should be the producer and the peer-to-peers. We're still debating if also history, API, and whatever. So you have any suggestions? We are open to hear your thoughts.
I'm mostly looking for the arguments for different situations and the benefit from that.
Obviously, the producer, I struggle with, I mean, yeah, it's great if all of it is, but if you reduce costs by running your API in Hetzer and it goes offline, and 5 of them go offline, and there's 13 others that are incentivized to be available or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I have mixed feelings, I think, about if that would only apply to everything you do or just key pieces. You know, BP, peer-to-peer. I don't care about my public peer-to-peer. That's not nearly as critical as my private peer-to-peers, because that's what's getting the transactions back and forth.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Or private peer-to-peer.
How about, I mean, do you even confirm that every BP has private peer-to-peers?
No.
You know, I mean, I'm just going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. For sure. That's why we're having this conversation. What are the things that we need to look into it?
I also, and I think you had said this before, I mean, there are some inherent penalties or point losses that are already associated to, if your API was at Hetzer and it got taken down, was it down for 8 hours? You're going to lose a SLR points or whatever, right? So, you know, your history, is it available? Well, if you don't run it in the data center, you know, that goes down, you wouldn't get dinged for the service being offline, right? So the uptime of your public services versus the critical chain infrastructure of, if Hetzer or the OVH, which one burned?
OVH.
If OVH literally burns to the ground again, it's not as detrimental to the core of the network. Yep, half of the APIs or a quarter of them may have gone offline, but there's plenty more of those to roll over and fail to, you know, whatever, as opposed to, and I still go back to, I don't think you're going to get your active top 21s to move away. There's no benefit to. They don't need the 2 points, and they wouldn't take the 20% extra, and all their other stuff probably runs in Hetzer. You know why? Because it's cheaper.
Yeah, I would like to have like strong guidelines and arguments for how large chunk is acceptable to have self-hosted, self-located in a co-location or at the Hetzner or other cloud provider, just to make this clear for all the guilds and upcoming guilds. Like, is it enough to have one server running the BP and the peer, or should everything be, or can you use Cloudflare for DDoS for your API, or are you not allowed to do that because that's not self-hosted? What stage do you reach to have this? Because Kfer responded before that it had to be 100% no load balancer at Hetzner or anything. So it would be nice to have that stated in a clear way.
And do you remember when
be...
Cloudflare boinked out? I mean, you said that, and I'm like, oh yeah, that took out half of the APIs everywhere because Cloudflare just shut down. And those of us that don't use Cloudflare, nope, no problem, never noticed it. But everybody else using Cloudflare for routing, their APIs were dead for like 2 days.
I'm using it a lot. I rely on Cloudflare.
Yeah, because if this is outlined and clear, then a team can say, okay, is it worth skipping this service and host it ourselves for these points or not? Or should we use this service but keep hosting everything else ourselves? Or how should we do? So clear guidelines is very important, I think.
Ooh, you take Cloudflare away from people, and there you go. There's the reason they're like, nah, I'm good. Because that's a whole nother battle. You talk about these rate limits, and you know why they don't have that problem? Because Cloudflare takes care of a lot of that for them. But that one time in 4 years or whatever, the Cloudflare died. That was worse than OVH burning to the ground. You're right. And that's why I say I struggle with, you know, I mean, your entire infrastructure, and then where is it okay and where is it not okay? Because 90% of people use Cloudflare. Is it okay to use, what was the site that Stan has, Contobo or something like that, that it's an alternative. Well, you know what? He didn't go down when Cloudflare went down.
Okay, lots of feedback here. some things we need to consider when we meet next, right? We'll be coming back on that list item when we had the chance to talk about it and redefine our detailed criteria for it. Okay?
Right. I would also, because there's only a few of us on this call that are representative, vocal, and obviously we tend to have a common side on this battle. But I would definitely talk to the other ones, you know, I mean, your value providers and other ones, and try to get some feedback on that, because I feel like they might say something different than, you know, oh, okay, sure. So don't just listen to me.
Okay.
That's obvious always.
Right. Or the Swede.
Then we got another, time is running. We got another 50 minutes. Let's try to talk through the remaining items. The next one, I like that a lot. Essential for user experience on Wax is that we provide reliable, performant, and resilient RPC APIs, right? Because that's where the user logs in. That's what the user uses to broadcast his transaction to our network. A bad RPC node can yield wrong results for get table row requests. And then there's also a layer on top of it, which is the API, which accepts those incoming transactions, estimates how much CPU is going to be consumed, and proposes to the user to spend that much for resources, or to allocate that much for resources. And here we have seen many inconsistencies in the past with different APIs billing different amounts of CPU for essentially the same transaction. A simple EOSIO token transfer. We have that wonderful dashboard from Wax Sweden provided, analyzing how much a transaction finally got billed on the BP when it was produced, not showing us how a transaction was built on the APIs. Therefore, during the last roundtable in December, we discussed we want to have a test or another validation to determine how good a RPC node is by testing all the different APIs we have with similar or with the exact same transaction, building an average or a median out of that number, like that same transaction got built that much milliseconds on Wax Sweden, and then it got built 10% less or more on Wax USA's API. So we see a difference there. Out of that average or median, we want to define a threshold, be it 10 or 20% above or below the median or average. Probably what we're interested in is overbilling. We are trying to solve the situation with transactions being overbilled on the API side. So therefore, we are going to test the billing on the API side. We are going to test that regularly. And then what we are proposing here is, what we're proposing here is that we essentially increase the score a RPC node can receive on the guidelines from a maximum of 1 point to a maximum of 2 points. 1 point for the same criteria that we currently apply, SLR, so availability and uptime of that API and functional and basic functionality test passes. And the second point will be for being within a certain range of the median or average of all the RPC nodes of registered guilds on Wax. How do we like that? Of course, this change can only be applied once we have the tool to validate the transaction billing on the APIs. That's a requirement for that criteria here to be updated. But let's say we have that tool and we want to apply the change. How do you like it? Any feedback for it?
Going to be tough. And like,
Right,
for instance,
tough.
We were
Yep.
just talking about how I, out of the blue, so lovingly got about 1,000, 1,500 requests a second, just dumped in my lap.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. Now it's handling the load, but, and I'm sure his 3,000, 4,000 a second, I mean, it handles it, but I would definitely expect, you know, I mean, your APIs, it does try to hyper-thread, multi-thread. I mean, you know, you do the best you can, but I could very easily see one state in time being different solely because of outside extreme. If you run that test when that guy's ripping those get tables, I bet you my API is not going to be as fast as normal. Now, you poll it multiple times and drop out those outliers. I know Anders asked about it. And I also warn you, there's something weird about billing sometimes. Sometimes it just goes wonky. I don't think anybody really knows why.
Yeah, but that's why you remove the outliers, right?
Right. That's what I was gonna say. Is it's a smaller occurrence, but you definitely don't just drop the top and the bottom. It's like, well, mostly the tops, but there is some wonkiness related to it. But I will also say your public, like Ross's and Sweden's and mine, you know, that take these millions and millions and millions of calls. I wouldn't be surprised if I can see on my CPU usage that API is using twice as much CPU. Now it's like 2 threads, you know, I don't know, 30%, but I can definitely see an increase in the load on that API server solely because somebody just decided to poop on me.
Okay, I see.
But you should still be within range. You know, I mean, I do think that you can accomplish a general goal of what you're looking for.
I think so too. The detailed criteria here for the test, for the validation, will be worked out still. We will come up with something sensible to just catch, let's say, the real outliers.
I'll also say there's
process.
two types of transactions. I mean, there's a lot more, but one is like the prime meridian or whatever the hell calculation, CPU cycle. The other, and we found this, is when you query state. You go walk a table in a action or got to do something, that's a whole different type of transaction than maybe CPU mechanics or even just simple mathematics.
And I think they will compare different actions.
Great. Well, that I would at least, you know, try one that's heavy CPU, you know, just calculation, because that my i9
before
should
was
smoke
to
it.
always check the top 50 actions currently. Top 50 most used actions.
Or something along that line. I mean, just, the point is identifying and intentionally testing, because like I think we found, I mean, the chipset infrastructure is what's impacting a lot of these, and I think it's the state access and all of that may make the CPU billing be higher because it's just having to wait. It's a Lambo, but you're hitting RAM, and that's a whole different story versus maybe Anders super hot rod with $8,000 sticks of RAM.
Whenever someone has a chunk of this data, I would love to play with it and see if I could help to figure out how to best use the data, or if other data should also be added to it.
What data are you interested in? The actual
the actions
billing
and
on
CPU
the API?
scores, the subjective billings.
Okay.
Like all the data that you collect, maybe frequency, how often you do it, and yeah, the data that is interesting to collect. Whenever that is collected, I would love to look at it and have some feedback or ideas.
Ditto. And same, like, I'll be happy to do a benchmark on my server and then let one of my indexing processes loose on the server and say, all right, now how does it respond in benchmark when it's taking an absolute smashing, to try to quantify some of this as much as we can. Happy to help.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, thanks for the feedback here. Definitely something we can add to the list, like continue defining the validations, I guess there's also no harm in sharing this bit of information, because we are going to build our own test cases. We are going to make sure that the test case is similar on every test we have. I believe having a better, a higher quality RPC API on Wax overall will increase the user experience a lot, removing any inconsistencies that the user may encounter while using different RPC API nodes. Cool. Next item on the list. We are, and nothing of that is definite, right? That's just a proposal to you guys. We are looking for feedback here. We are trying to conclude the full and partial Hyperion debate that we had for the past weeks and months, or even years. But first of all, change to the Hyperion partial node we are proposing is that we are trimming down, or that's what I proposed. I'm not sure if my IG colleagues were against it or for it. Trim the partial Hyperion data to 4 weeks. Doesn't really matter if it's 6 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, I would personally say, but we want to make sure that the token balances are indexed correctly, which apparently is possible with the latest Hyperion version, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, if you use the later one, I think it has a tool that should try to go back and fill those in. But if you only have 4 weeks worth of data, you would only have token balance.
I haven't tested that tool yet either.
That's what I say. I haven't either. I mean, I'm running 3.5, but I haven't. I mean, a lot of mine would be full anyway. So
I also have a
point
question.
is that
if it doesn't matter if it's 4, 6, or 8 weeks, why change it?
I think by keeping it as short as possible, we boil down the requirements by as much as possible. And on the side, we want to have the full Hyperions, which give you, and still free without an API, without the pricing, right? Provided to just query historical data that is older. But the most frequent use case for Hyperions, for the partial Hyperions, is streaming some table changes, or fetching a couple of transactions that have been done today, possibly. So trimming that down also aims a little bit to educate the user on which Hyperion node he should use to access what kind of data, while also making just the requirements for hosting a partial Hyperion as light as possible. Replaying such a node or restoring from an Elasticsearch repository will take less time. For example, the backups provided could be smaller. I don't know
how much time it takes to replay all the account balances. Have you, Michael, have you seen Igor testing that?
No, I haven't run. I mean, it would be a rescan of every block, just like the ABI scan is. It goes through, it reads every block and says, is there something I need to pick up out of here, which would be an account. I mean, they're going to have to go back and deserialize and find all of those. Oh, no. I think he said that he was going to build it to query the tables. So it shouldn't take super long, right? You're not going to have to reprocess the chain. It would try to pick up on any of the account balance tables locally. So it probably won't take long. But the whole point is that it ain't close to being today, in my opinion. Definitely if you're not able to require 3.5, because the current version, 3.9-10 or whatever, doesn't even have that ability. You literally, like ours, we always fail to get account balances for these validations because they're looking for an account that hasn't done anything in 6 months. Our partial history hasn't seen it, you know.
Overall, I admire their plan to add the token balances to the Hyperion. As we see, it has a few implications to it. If I was advising a team on how can we get token balances on Wax, I would definitely send them to Light API.
Right.
That's
Or the
personally me.
tables. I mean, if you need somebody else to do the work for you, sure, here's some other services that are doing it. But literally all they're doing is just reading the data from the chain and looking for the token contract and indexing it, you know. But yes.
Okay, I
Talos
noted
can do a good
also.
job. You could do that with
know-
Anders thing.
I noted also that this requires also version 3.5 to be released if we want to take that step.
Like include noses also there. I don't see any requirements on filtering. What's the plan there?
Essentially, we don't care. I think. Okay, wait.
Partial was supposed to not be filtered, I think.
It was
was
supposed to
it?
not be filtered, but ever since they added the filters in the health check where
They
you
should be
can,
clarified and very detailed as well.
yeah, you're right.
I didn't
still
ever,
think
Anders, did you find the filters in your health checks? I went and
No,
looked and
no,
I didn't ever see them.
it's not there yet.
Right. So we talked about it, but it's difficult to see that. And as Null has found, you find out the hard way. But I mean, I'd argue no history solution should be filtering shit. You should either have the range of history you said you've got or you don't.
Yeah, I think when we had that discussion, I think I mixed up with that. He added the limits that I asked for, like the API limits,
Right.
into the health check, and not the filter details. But I want that as well.
I want that too. But I'm still convinced that by bringing down the period, the amount of data that needs to be indexed in an Hyperion even further down from 4 weeks, for example, to 2 weeks, that will also make it easier to not filter your Hyperion.
Even at
or
6 weeks,
anything,
I
right?
don't think there's any reason left to filter at all. Like really.
You can fit that in about a 2
So,
terabyte drive, if I remember right. And that's how we run it. We don't run it off a time frame. We run it on the space of the drive.
The only reason left to filter is because you just don't want alien worlds queries. So that's the only thing it does. If you filter, filtering does not really do much to your load or your capacity, but what it does is it prevents you from getting spammed for alien worlds or farmers world transactions. So that's the only real reason I think right now to filter.
Right. I don't think any public should have filters. My opinion. That's just my opinion.
Same.
But I don't think either there isn't many endpoints that are filtered right now. I think last time I checked it was 3 or 4.
Oh, I was
At all.
Noel just called
If
one
not.
out, but
I think it was only like Amsterdam and Hive and Waxdow out of the top of my head. Which one was the one not called out?
Amsterdam. He said Amsterdam doesn't have AW. So, but yes, there are people that definitely have it filtered.
I stumbled on this when I was.
I think why it might not be in the health call is because you need to also see if the ship node you use, if that data is filtered, right?
I don't think you can filter ship. Filter is just a fire hose. There is no filter. That's the whole problem. Is you have to ingest the whole block every time.
Is it only for push transactions and stuff? Because you can filter different contracts. Is that only on the ship reader?
You can do filters on the trace API, but yeah, I mean the ship plugin. There's no filters on the ship plugin. That's it. That's why it's the fire hose. Is you get every single block serialized, and it's up to you to figure out what was in it, and then if you want it or not. Which is why the majority of the work has to be done anyway, just to figure out, oh, this is AW. Nope, don't store it. It helps with storage requirements. It doesn't help with performance. But no, I state history is Now you can have a truncated range, you know, and I only started state history at certain block, but you can't filter contracts until you get it and deserialize it and then figure out what was in each one of those blocks, right? I think.
Yeah,
You guys know more about working with it. But that's the good and the bad of it. And that's, like I say, from Hyperion's side, 90% of the work is all the same. It has to be broken down to then figure out, oh, I didn't really care about this. And you got to store it in state history because it's part of the state, you know?
Okay, so still needs a little bit of clarification, but you guys can anticipate there will be a change, the latest when 3.5 gets rolled out. That's where we will be able to apply some of the changes that we proposed today. But as I understand, it's a hard requirement for some of the, for many of the for all of the things we proposed today. So we need to talk to Igor a little bit.
Right. But as for the time frame, I do agree. Most people using parcel history don't notice a difference between 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or 8 weeks. Really, anything more than a week, they probably don't. They're just looking for recent history to keep up.
Yeah, and then we will still have the full Hyperion histories where you can query just historical data.
I mean, if you need the data, go and use it. You know,
you need the data, consciously query them, please. Consciously query whatever you need.
And I can tell you, they're currently doing that. When I was in my proxy this morning, reading, watching everything, you can see people that are just smashing get transaction, history, whatever the history query is for the transaction, maybe get transaction. But they're just constantly checking the status of transactions when there's literally a better way of doing it. They just don't know. But they're just.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's just that. They also don't update their scripts and stuff from before.
You know why? They don't need to. Because we provide them exactly what they need. That's my point. Anyway.
On the next point, I have a question because I don't understand it on the list.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't understand the full history. What means 0 points to reduced by 20 points?
Okay, this is a fairly complex one. It's not defined, but what we are trying to do here is we essentially will disincentivize the full Hyperion history from the tech criteria. So there will be no points awarded for the full histories, but that will only take place once we have 5 full Hyperion providers, which I'm going to happily select here, just out of my gut. No, of course you will need to, the criteria will be something like you will need to run or host Hyperion on your own hardware. You will need to have demonstrated for a long while that you're,
Janis, I think that you're running before walking. We haven't
this is
decided.
just
this
is out in the bye, guys.
And not up to us to decide. We just
this is just what we have been discussing for a couple times in the past. You don't need to explain it right for everything from the start again. It's just the same thing. We wanted to discontinue full history for points as a TechOps criteria and just have dedicated full history providers that are paid and selected for by WAX. That's it.
Yeah, I was, in case it wasn't clear, I was joking, but maybe it's not the time to joke.
Yeah, it wasn't clear.
Yeah,
nice
okay.
that Kiefer clarified things.
Yeah, so essentially the WAX team is going to select a few full Hyperion providers. The plan is they're going to get paid separately for providing a high quality service here. And that way we will remove the full Hyperion history points from the tech criteria. Did that answer your question, Anders?
Yes.
Okay. So we're moving on with that one. item. We can't put a timeline behind it yet, but this will definitely happen somewhere in 2025. And then another consideration, last item on the list for today, another consideration something we are considering right now is that providing an API like Hyperion Partial, Atomic Assets API, Light API, you will only receive those points if you at the same time provide the backups for that API. This is a change we are proposing. How do you feel about that one?
You only get credit for an API if you publicly provide backups for that API data?
Yeah, that's the idea here.
What exactly does that mean?
In case you are providing a partial Hyperion or even simpler Atomic Assets API and you want to get those points rewarded, you will need to also provide a backup, which is
Why?
Why?
Yeah, that's a good one.
If I'm going to take 1 million
and also the more
Atomic
complex
API
question,
requests, why would you put that burden on me to also have to provide public backups? They don't want backups. They're smashing my shit for the data.
The core idea here is that everybody that is providing these endpoints is also able to provide these backups. And
not necessarily.
I don't agree with that. Almost
Hyperion
all the
backups
time
are complex.
Right. I mean, in order to take like some of these, you have to take them offline, like snapshots. You have to have a dedicated node to stop because it can't impact anything else. You can't have data changing while you're running these things. And then I've got to move terabytes and terabytes of data, and then I've got to provide it. Remember, I'm all in one bandwidth. So I make the decision not to provide those big ones because I don't want you ripping my bandwidth for 5 days downloading a state history file. But I'm not going to get credit for Atomic because I won't let you also get the backups here when there are 15 others. That doesn't make any sense as a provider. You can get points for it. I like that, but not getting points for providing the API that's getting used because you don't also provide public downloadable backups of the same service. That doesn't make sense to me personally, I guess.
So
reward them separately.
Yeah, that's what we currently do. Currently reward them separately. Right. But we were considering that it makes sense to bundle this.
I think you're going to kind of end up with the same thing. You're going to. Oh, go ahead.
Do you understand how backups of Hyperion and Elasticsearch work?
I think I do.
Okay. How?
That's not fair.
No, but it's not like you upload a packed file and then it's done. That's not how it works, right? You set up separate nodes that you need to connect to and pull data from.
You go to Ross's site, you copy the 3 commands that he pasted there for you, and you let her rip. That's exactly what you do.
Because to enable this, you need to set up a separate extra cluster of Elasticsearch nodes that other people are allowed to connect to. That's how the Elastic's backup works, basically.
I'm afraid of one thing too. If I want to have a proper backup, I will just download whatever I find on ESPhere or someone else's node and provide it.
Well, and here's the thing is like an Atomic backup. I don't know, what is it, about a terabyte of data, maybe 2?
Yeah.
I don't want you to download 2 terabytes of data from me. I'll make the decision. I'm not going to get the points for providing those backups because there's plenty other ones out there. But I'm all about running the APIs. I got 3 Atomic APIs that I'm ready to let handle millions of transactions.
Yeah,
and
makes
not
sense.
be able to provide that.
I must admit, I didn't factor in the bandwidth limitation. Especially if you're self-hosted, you have this bandwidth limitation. And
if you want to provide the API, by all means, provide the API. Offload it from all the other ones that are taking the smashing. If you don't want to also do the backups and deal with the process of creating them and hosting them, Don't. I don't have backups. You know why? Because I have so many servers that when one blows up, I don't restore from a backup. I can just build a new one.
Most people use Ross's big data center snapshots for Elastic, not his self-hosted ones, because they are in Canada. So Canada is faster for most people compared to the Kangaroo Town.
Null asks if you can get points for uploading backups to Usenet. I would venture to say yes, as long as it was a documented location that was usable.
Usenet? Why Usenet?
I don't, torrents, I don't care. I mean, the point is
Everything.
news groups.
LimeWire.
It's free real estate. Oh, there you go. I mean, not LimeWire. I will also say, and it's kind of a decent transition because I think it was Charles that mentioned, and it's definitely a quirk of the standardization of said backups. You know, not only atomic, you know, it's obviously one. Do you use the timestamp for it? Do you have a block number? Do you have, you know, I mean, do you know what's in it? Because I think that sometimes you have market data, sometimes you don't have market data, you know, I mean, so there's definitely, even within atomic, but I think he was more explicitly kind of talking about Node OS snapshots, which kind of fall into the same, if you're providing them, there's no standard, there's no, there's very little verification even, right? If I say it's from a certain block, you have no clue.
Yeah, I mean, it's simply also unfeasible to test those backups if they are working properly.
Yes, once you really get down to the nitty gritty. I mean, you can do a best effort, by all means. I support that, but like ours, I mean, somebody will just be like, oh, 2 days ago you started producing, you know, 111 byte tar files, and it's like, oops. And it's really difficult to monitor those types of nodes because they go offline, or they're constantly breaking or out of sync or whatever. And I would run around with Ross on his heads up because my heads up display is always screaming at me because there's a snapshot node somewhere that's offline at any given time. So it's always, so I don't monitor my snapshot nodes. Well, then something boinks and it stops syncing blocks unlinkable or whatever. I don't know. It thinks it's doing the right job, but it's not. So it's tough, but I do think it may be worth discussing the standardization and then able to build scripts off of.
All right. So thanks a lot for the feedback that you guys brought to us. Time for round 2 for us to go back and redefine or detail out those proposed changes. We will have a similar talk again. Before we conclude that, let's take maybe a minute or two. I want to ask you guys if there's anything within the current guidelines that you are unhappy with or which you want to see discussed. I'm pulling up one of our guilds here and their respective infrastructure evaluation score sheet. Anything about those criteria that you want to see discussed next? Anything?
I would like for that guild to lose about 100 points if I can request that. That would help me.
I don't think that will necessarily help you, but okay.
It helps you more.
That's
if you gain
true.
100 points.
But I am also willing. Hey, man, if I can just stick it to Andrews, I'm okay with that. I don't know. I don't agree with everything, but I know you guys are working on things, and I just like to see it discussed and adapted.
Mm-hmm.
So
So here also the minimum requirements, anything that we should shed some light on?
I don't know.
No?
I can tell you this, that there were people around the space that were like, man, you guys on wax, y'all are next level. So all those requirements are definitely renowned for being intense.
Yeah, we demand something, but we also provide a great a great infrastructure to our ecosystem. I think
Right.
it's one of a kind when you compare it to other blockchain networks where you really quickly, well, first of all, you don't even know which node to push your transactions to, so you default to whatever is set up in your MetaMask, and then you have no clue about where your data is coming from, if it's valid, if it's not, nobody cares. And you rely a lot on centralized services to provide you with the APIs necessary to accomplish your task, which has a price tag to it. So constantly working to provide a nice public infrastructure. And that's why we have those requirements. But yeah, over the time, we've seen also that you guys, the guilds, adopted a lot of those requirements. You're working towards making your setups more reliable and resilient to attacks, while also maintaining a good performance. Works out pretty good, I'd say.
Always room for improvement.
Yeah. And most definitely improvement in terms of cost also. Okay, who can help with getting a timeline squeezed out of Igor for the 3.5 release?
Igor.
From
Igor
an operator
himself.
perspective, it's not really a rush. It's more about getting you updated a small fix on things that we notice from an operator perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like I say, there is a major overhaul at some point coming that changes that reporting to the hub to be at more of a proxy level versus a Hyperion server level. So, I mean, that's major. So I assume that could take a little while.
Okay. Here's what I'm trying to do then. I'll invite Igor for next week to talk to us about.
Well, I'd say you want the answer, I would talk to Igor.
Yeah, but I always feel like it's missed opportunity if we don't invite him to the call and just be able to have a talk with him, because the last times we had him on the call were pretty good. We got some answers. We got a demo of Query Hub, and I'm pretty sure it motivates him too to push that over the goal line. So yeah, that's next week, Wax Tech Tuesday. Going to ask Igor, and then in 2 weeks we are having Lucas with us to discuss the 2025 roadmap. And today we decided that we are again going to do it in a survey style. So to give them some time to prepare their answers and have an answer for our questions, we'll share a Google form again, where you can submit whatever question you have to the Wax team or to Lucas specifically. There will be 1 week of time for you to complete that form, and then we can have a nice talk with a lot of information in 2 weeks, where we have Lucas on the round table. Although we might have that at a later time. It will be announced earlier this time than on Tuesday, but we're probably going to have him at a later slot, like 7 or 8 p.m. UTC or something.
Outside of the questions, will he also have like a summarized update on what they have been working on and what they are working on?
I think that's what's currently being worked on. We are meeting tomorrow again.
It was
And-
posted just this moment.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Yeah. Then there was a roadmap published just now at the Works Telegram announcement channel. I'm forwarding it to the governance channel right now. And then you can have a read for yourself, and based on that, we can still have the survey and ask questions to the Works team or to Lucas directly. Just in an organized way, you know. If we have the questions before, and we can just have a good talk and proper answers. Alrighty. That's it for today.
I like this article. Looks good. I'm happy if we do these.